The Batman Arkham series is unequivocally one of the best series of games we've ever seen, and despite its controversial release, Arkham Knight is no exception. Although in a lot of people's eyes being a letdown in comparison to its predecessors, Arkham Knight is without a doubt an exceptional game and one of the best superhero games we've ever seen. That being said, the numerous criticisms of the game and claims of it being a disappointment aren't entirely unfounded. So today, let's have a look at what Batman Arkham Knight does great and what it does terribly, and once again ask what matters more. As always, we start with a positive aspect of the game, and of course you'd be hard pressed to talk about Arkham Knight without mentioning its stellar stealth system. From the offset of the series, the Predator system was revolutionary in terms of stealth, and was one of the most important factors in that oh so cliched feeling of being Batman that Asylum created, and over the years Rockstar found ways to continually improve to the point where Arkham Knight feels like a true perfection of the system. All of the many tools and gadgets from prior games return, along with new additions such as the Disruptor and the Voice Replicator that both add new options in the way you control your opponent's actions and emotions. Speaking of which, the fear mechanic becomes far more useful in Arkham Knight, with the originally superficial raised heart rate of enemies being integrated into the new Fear multi-takedown, which becomes a vital tool when faced with the Arkham Knight's limitless army. That being said though, that brings us to one of the biggest letdowns of Arkham Knight, being the Arkham Knight himself. When Rocksteady first advertised the fact that they were creating an entirely new series exclusive villain to the Cape Crusaders' incredible rogues gallery, it got fans everywhere intrigued. However, it took almost no time at all for any fan to realise that the Arkham Knight was simply a retconned retelling of the iconic Red Hood story from the comics. However, what we come to realise is that this incarnation of the story lacked nearly all the gravitas, build up and intrigue of the original comic story, replaced with unremarkable flashbacks and predictable story beats, as well as a version of Jason Todd that lacks a lot of the moral and ethical depth of his comic counterpart. Instead of truly highlighting the flaws in Batman's philosophy, Jason comes across as more of a whiny teen, and his argument is somewhat lackluster in this universe considering everyone already believes that Batman killed the Joker in Arkham City. On top of that, the new additions to his character, namely the private militia of tanks, helicopters and soldiers, are never really explained, leaving major plot holes in continuity that do nothing but take the player out of the character-focused plotline. Thankfully though, this underexplained private militia does have a positive effect on the game's overall quality, as it provides a slew of extra content to the expansive and gorgeous world. After Arkham City first brought the series fully into the open world genre with many side arcs, Arkham Knight goes all out in fleshing out its fully realised Gotham with content, utilising Batman's wide rogues gallery to provide numerous different side arcs that incorporate every mechanic the game has to offer, whether it be fighting, driving, stealth, investigation, or of course in the case of Riddler, problem solving. These pieces of side content not only build on the game's experience, but further flesh out the already hugely detailed universe of the Arkham games, introducing lesser known villains such as Professor Pig and Man-Bat, as well as exploring the characters of Nightwing and Catwoman. Of course, all of these fantastic pieces of content take place in the beautiful world of Gotham City. However, the one downside to the world is the lack of civilian NPCs, which brings us to another of Arkham Knight's weak elements, the narrative as a whole. Whilst the Red Hood incorporation into the story is bad in itself, it's only a small part in a contrived, confusing, oftentimes wildly frustrating plotline that contradicts itself and misses the mark in so many ways. Although the Arkham games have always focused on Batman and Bruce Wayne as a character far more than the plot at large, each of Knight's predecessors had an interesting and engaging narratives told throughout, but in Knight it feels very much like the plot itself was an afterthought. As Scarecrow suddenly gets aspirations to become some kind of god, he decides to formulate enough fear toxins to take over Gotham, except by the time his plan comes to fruition, Gotham's already been evacuated. And then when Batman reaches the Ace Chemicals building, it's revealed that Scarecrow has enough fear toxin in the form of Cloudburst to release on the whole of Gotham anyway. Oh, and despite having countless opportunities to do so, Scarecrow and the Arkham Knight both refuse to kill Batman so that he has to theatrically watch the city crumble, which may be the biggest supervillain cliche of all time. And that's all without mentioning the nonsensical Joker subplot that's twisted into the story as an excuse to make the Clown Prince of Crime essentially the main villain for the 4th time in a row. A subplot which leads Batman to conclude he simply has to come to an end on that night, despite having countless opportunities to just, not do that. It is a bizarre story full of contrivances and coincidence that makes it hard to truly engage with, and too often it feels like Rocksteady's own feelings on the series bled into the writing, which leads to a fairly underwhelming conclusion for such an iconic adaptation of the character. Thankfully though, despite the main story of the game being underwhelming, we got a plethora of quality single player DLC to go along with it, that fleshes out pretty much all of the game's side characters in meaningful and interesting ways. Not only are Season of Infamy and the extra challenge maps great from a gameplay perspective, but we also get the Red Hood story story pack, Harley Quinn story pack, A Matter of Family, GCPD Lockdown, A Flip of a Coin, and Catwoman's Revenge. And although each individual story differs in quality and length, as a whole these provide masses of fresh and interesting content, all for a price which would be insanely cheap if it were to release in 2022's gaming landscape. The DLCs are fantastic, and most importantly, they almost entirely ignore the absolute worst aspect of Batman Arkham Knight. That's right, I had to mention it at least once. The inclusion of the Batmobile into these games was something that the CEO of Rocksteady said simply wouldn't fit back in 2009, and it's safe to say he was right, as the Batmobile goes from what could have been a fun addition and movement system to a core aspect of nearly 50% of the gameplay, as half the missions devolve into a tank shootout. Something that isn't exactly in keeping with the fantasy of being the world's greatest detective. Firing missiles at tanks and helicopters isn't just unaligned with the experience of a Batman game, but it becomes tedious after just the first fight. So when it becomes the core gameplay loop and is incorporated into two of the biggest boss fights in the game, it's safe to say it can full on ruin the experience of the game at some points. That being said, I'm one of few people who doesn't believe Arkham Knight is entirely ruined by its flaws, because to be honest, its peaks are the best in the franchise, whether it be Predator, investigation, or combat. Although its narrative is lackluster and stuffed to the brim with tank missions, surprisingly these can be largely ignored as you simply traverse the world of Gotham as a fully realised Dark Knight. And that is an experience you can't get from any other game. But as always, that is just my opinion. Yeah, I know it looks a bit weird in here, I'm filming at night, I'm not used to it, I need to figure out the whole lighting setup. Anyway, that is just my opinion, and I'm sure plenty of people will disagree with me, so if you do, or if you agree with me, let me know why in the comments down below. Also, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit like, and if you're new here and want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe with post notifications turned on. I've been Joe, aka Found in Scarab, and I will see you in the next one.